My name is Bill Thomas. I'm a writer, consulting producer, and now podcaster. I am now trying to use my experience as the brother of a murder victim to help other victims of violent crime. I'm working on a book on the unsolved Colonial Parkway murders, and I'm the co-administrator of the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook group together with Kristin Dilley.
My name is Kristin Dilley. I'm a writer, a researcher, a teacher, and a victims advocate, as well as the social media manager and co-administrator for the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook page with my partner in crime, Bill Thomas. Welcome to Mind Over Murder. I'm Kristin Dilley.
And I'm Bill Thomas.
We're joined again by David Mittelman of Othram, here to thrill us with his tales of DNA and forensic daring do. David, thank you for joining us again. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
In our last episode, we were talking about the Little Miss Nobody case, which caused a major splash, but I'm going to ask you about one that I think is probably going to cause even more of it. I realize there's a certain amount that you may not be able to say, but we would be remiss in our podcasting duties if we didn't ask about the Brianna Maitland case. What,
Sure.
if anything, can you tell us about recent possible developments in the Brianna Maitland case with regard to DNA?
Sure. Just as a quick catch up to the one person on earth that doesn't know about this case. Brianna Maitland was 17 years old when she vanished. This was in 2004. And they found her car backed into a building and no trace of her. And that's really the end of that case. They have pursued so many leads, but missing persons cases are really hard. When you have a crime for which there's evidence, or you have an unidentified body for which there's evidence, you have something to work from to derive clues. What do you do when someone vanishes, right? Unless something's left, what can you do? The case has had no action in 15 years. I was asked, it was an unusual request, but I was asked by the Vermont State Police to examine some evidence that was found at the scene with the hope that this evidence tied to a person who may be of interest to the investigation and be able to shed light on what had happened to her. So this evidence was identified early on. It was not new that they found it. They had this evidence. They built a DNA profile for it, an STR profile. They put it into CODIS, and they've actually used it over the last decade plus to rule out people. There was all sorts of folks that they matched it against. I think her friends, possible ex-boyfriend,
former boyfriend,
matched
right?
Against this, have been matched against this profile, but none of them were a match. So it's like, who is this unknown profile, and how does this relate? And so they asked us if we'd be able to help them figure out what had happened. We crowdfunded that case on DNASolves.com. It's one of our earlier crowdfunds, and got to work. And it was a tricky case. The genealogy on this case was actually pretty tricky. Building the profile ended up not being the hard part of this case. When we did succeed in building the profile, and we did succeed in generating some investigative leads, and this was done in-house with our in-house team, we passed that information back to the Vermont State Police. They took that information and did additional investigative work, including their own DNA confirmations, to confirm that we'd successfully identified the person that was essentially the contributor to this evidence. And they haven't said much more than that. They're now investigating the case further. I think this is a case that's so important to them. They've been working on this case for over a decade. Brianna's father, Bruce, is a very prominent figure in the space now, runs his own nonprofit to help other people that are missing folks. And I think he's been very vocal about wanting to do whatever can be done to generate any leads at all. I guess the optimistic thing would be that for the first time in 15 years, we've got some new information for them to work from. I have to also temper that and say the case is not solved. She's not found, and we don't know who did it. We don't know anyways. I feel like it's one of those things where it's not a solved case. We succeeded in the part we're supposed to do, but I think this just highlights again, the work we do isn't to solve a case. The work we do is to generate information. And there's an important investigation that sometimes can take some time before it leads from just collected information to an answer. And like you guys and everyone else, I just have to be patient. But I feel like to the extent that science could provide information, we've done the best that science can do to provide that information. Again, they've confirmed the information that we've provided to them. So now we all are kind of spectators. I've joined you guys in the spectator box to see what happens next.
I know that Mr. Maitland and his organization, Private Investigations for the Missing, and their team have put a tremendous amount of effort into this case. And
Yes.
It sounds like the Vermont State Police have not given up on this case, far from it. They're continuing to try to move this case forward. Although, as you said, you're talking about a 15-year-old case and a lot of false starts or dead ends. There's a lot of kind of urban myths surrounding the case that you can't tell whether these are factual stories of what might have happened to Brianna or kids back in the day embellishing their reputation by claiming to have knowledge about what happened to poor Brianna. There's a lot of sort of clouds of confusion surrounding this case, which happened in this beautiful kind of rural part of northern Vermont.
Missing persons cases are just frustrating because there's not a lot of tangible evidence to work from necessarily. There's the issue you brought up of the stories, rumors, false starts, information that isn't complete. And then also at the site of the event, then people then disperse. People move to other areas. Some people may not even be alive anymore. It's frustrating. I really feel for Bruce because it just feels as time goes on, it's harder and harder to hold all the players together, keep the scene together, and just know what had happened. It's a testament to those investigators who are still hacking away at this. And in fact, we talked to the Vermont State Police and we wanted to help them. This is a case that they selected. So I think that speaks volumes. I did not ask for the Brianna Maitland case. We were going to do casework with them. And this was the case that they said, if you've got a great technique, here's the case you want to work on. They picked it. And I think that's wonderful. I think they deserve credit for making this their priority.
I know they've cross-referenced against at least 11 suspects because they said so in the Vermont State Police
That's correct.
Press release. The media coverage, of course, can only pick up on the facts that they have as provided by the law enforcement agency. If we're understanding the articles correctly, it does sound like there may have been a match between evidence found outside the car and inside the car. Is that correct?
I don't know. I just know that those 11 people were not the person. So all 11 people were ruled out.
The person of interest is still outside that sphere of the 11 people that they had looked at.
The person of interest was not a person they had previously considered. And they haven't released his name because, as I said, it's not clear that there's a suspect yet at this case. So all I can tell you from a factual point of view is that we have correctly identified the donor of that DNA evidence, but I don't understand. I myself am not privy to the crime scene. Like I don't have the photos. I don't have the knowledge of it. We're generally given lab reports. I have like lab reports on the condition of the DNA. So I don't have the context, even if I wanted to speak to why they selected that evidence, why it's probative. Like those are all things that I can't answer. What I can tell you is that we know for sure who contributed the DNA. They've confirmed that, and it's not one of the 11 people that they'd considered. So that's all I really know. It's not like I don't want to know more, so I'll be refreshing my browser as well to see what happens. And we'll post an update on DNA Solves if we get one.
We've interviewed Bruce Maitland and the private investigators who've worked this case, and we've also had a number of off-the-record conversations with them. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves either. Obviously, just because someone's DNA is found at a crime scene, that doesn't necessarily mean they're the offender.
There's an investigative process that they have to go through to confirm that we have identified the right person, and then to confirm where that person fits into the scheme of the events, which is something that we're generally blind to. All I can say is the DNA work, it was successfully completed, but again, we're at the mercy of what can be uncovered in this investigation. I'm obviously very interested. We spent a lot of time on this case. I'm very eager to find out what happened.
We may want to have our friends Greg Overacker and Lou Barry, who are the two private investigators.
Yeah, bring them on and have them join me in the hot seat because I'm getting lonely.
But it's very exciting that you have been able to move your part of the assignment forward.
Yeah, at the end of the day, however it turns out, like there have been no leads on this case. And if we can do anything, even just to say, suppose they determine that this is not a person that is relevant or knowledgeable to the incident or whatever they determine, then that tells you perhaps the people that are ruled out aren't necessarily excluded as being involved in the case. Like there's information to be gained regardless of outcomes. I think the best thing is just let them do the job they're supposed to do, take their time, get it right. And then I think the DNA testing was an important addition to this case because either way, it allows you to either exclude a possibility to determine what happened or to basically reject previous exclusions, if that makes sense. So there is value that has been created from being able to understand who was the contributor of this DNA. And at the least, they're not going to continue to try to match people against it.
David, I want to switch gears for just 1 second. And you've mentioned a couple of times the concept of crowdfunding, which I think at this point we're all familiar with. But I know that in addition to crowdfunding, you have individual donors and then some organizations that are underwriting the cost of cases. Can you speak to some of the people who are currently underwriting those cases? I know, for example, Paul Holes and Billy Jensen contributed a little bit here recently. Can you give shout outs to those people who are doing great work?
I will, and I need to apologize. You asked me so many hard questions about Brianna Maitland. I forgot to tell you the origin here. The Vermont State Police wanted to work this case, but we had to go to the public to fund it. And Paul Holes and Billy Jensen funded this case. Okay. And they've supported some of the other cases that we're doing as well.
Like we didn't admire them enough already.
I know.
That's how Paul is. He continuously surprises you. Just when you think you've admired him enough, there's more to admire. He surprised me. He gave me a call and he said, "See you at CrimeCon. We're talking back to back." So now we're strategizing.
Oh wow! See, we haven't seen.
I don't know if I was allowed to say that, but it is what it is.
We're super excited.
We'll be collaborating. We'll be collaborating on some exciting things to share at CrimeCon. I love that guy. We really got to spend time together working the Carla Walker case, which is a case so personal to me. And I owe that all to Paul. And so just being able to reconnect with him again. He was at the press conference for the Walker County Jane Doe. So much this guy cares. He came to visit. We were announcing the case. He came to the press conference. He's definitely fun to listen to, and he's very entertaining on the podcast. And he's an all around, very knowledgeable forensics person, but he's also got a really big heart, and it's not chronicled all the time online, but he's always there. He's everywhere you look, there's Paul Holes doing something. So he's working behind the scenes. I got to tell you another funny story. This is some cutting edge inside info that now only you and all your listeners know. You may or may not be aware of the Candy Rogers case. This was a little girl that was assaulted and murdered in 1959 in Washington State. She was one of the campfire girls selling mints. Intractable case. All the labs I went to, they said, this case can't be worked. It's 1959. It's a sex assault. How are you going to find a suspect to a case that old? Believe it or not, they were talking to Paul Holes, and Paul Holes said, I heard that same story for Carla Walker. Send it to Othram. They'll figure it out. So that's how we got connected. We would have otherwise never heard about it. And so even when you don't think Paul Holes was involved, he was involved. And so we get a call. We start working the case. It was actually after we had solved the case. I asked the detective, Zach Storman, I'm like, how did you even hear about us? Because earlier on, because Paul Holes said that if you can figure out that case, you can figure out this case. I was like, oh, great. Yeah, he's a real advocate. He consults for a lot of folks, always advises on how to use the best techniques. And he's himself experienced so much ups and downs in this area that I think he's just an all-around expert. So anyways, Paul Holes and Billy Jensen, super thanks to them. And I think we should credit Murder Squad too, because I think it was all of it together that credited us.
Absolutely.
We have, the parent company, this is unrelated, but the parent company of a whole bunch of true crime podcasts, a company called Audio Chuck, they reached out to us, and this is their second. They reached out to us and said, we'd like to support some cases. So they supported us in 2021, and they just renewed their support.
Oh, that's great news.
Wow.
It's amazing. So we've been working all these cases, and we've got these. What I love about Audio Chuck is that they just want to make a difference. And so we have these cases that I just can't find a way to fund. Some of these unidentified persons cases, particularly, it's just how do you emotionally connect to someone you don't know? It's just weird. It's easy to connect once you know who they are. And they funded these cases. They funded a case in the Seattle area. It was actually an Air Force vet that was found in a river there, and we were able to identify him with the support of Audio Chuck. And just a week ago, actually, talking about our 5 or 6 solves in the last week and a half, that case in Vegas, the man that was murdered and left in the desert and never. That's an Audio Chuck funded case. So Audio Chuck's done wonderful things. Now, Audio Chuck also. The folks behind Audio Chuck also have a nonprofit called Season of Justice.
Right.
Long history with them. I think that counts. They've been underwriting cases, not directly to us, but they'll underwrite cases to law enforcement. They use Othram, so they've been a huge support. We've got some discussions going with a couple other groups that we'll announce the next time you and I chat. There's a substantial growing number of folks underwriting in what I would call the sponsorship category. Of course, we also have just ordinary folks, philanthropists that just want to make a difference. In Mississippi, Kristin and her team has been working very closely with Carla Davis.
Tell us a little bit more about Carla Davis. She's been doing all kinds of great stuff.
Well, she really cares about Mississippi. So she said, if you've got a case in Mississippi, I'm happy to help fund it. And Kristin has been pulling case after case. Kristin told me the other day, I'm going to empty NamUs. And by the way, you guys should go check out how many unidentified there are in Mississippi. That number in NamUs is beginning to get very tiny. We're approaching single-digit numbers
You're
left.
kidding.
Wow.
Yeah, I believe that Kristin at some point, I don't want to steal her thunder. You should interview her next, but
We will.
She's gonna announce emptying NamUs for Mississippi. And she's done that largely with the support of Carla Davis, who is a Mississippi native, likes genealogy, and wants to bankroll these. And
This is
it's helped with a number
amazing.
of cases,
Wow.
including Gary Simpson, who was just his most recent solve. And then,
And I see Carla
there's-
commenting on DNA Solves advocates. On
Oh, yeah.
Facebook.
That's the other thing you should know is, so we'll talk to Paul, to Carla, to these other people. They're not just bankrolling it in like, it's not just like a name on a check. It's they're really invested. They're part of the community. They chat in the group. We have another guy. His name is Justin Wu. He's a tech entrepreneur. He doesn't know anything about genealogy, but he likes tech, and he really feels like Vegas has done good by him. He's had a lot of.
He's
success
from
in
Las Vegas. Yeah.
Yeah, and he started a nonprofit called Vegas Helps, and he's tried to find ways to give back to the community. He finds out what we're doing. He's a pretty avid commenter in our group too. Sometimes I think he geeks out more than I do on these solves, and so he decided there's no reason, if technology and science are not the barrier, there's no limitations in the science and technology, and I'm telling you, there's none. It's 2022, and I just don't see any scientific barriers. Some will be harder, some will be easier, but they all can get done. The only barrier, the only reason NamUs exists is because we don't have enough money to go clear them all out right now. That's it. If we had someone in every helping, whether it's in Nevada or Mississippi or wherever, the NamUs would just be like, it would just drain to the bottom. So he said, you know what? I really want to tackle this sex assault problem in Vegas. And again, it's just been case after case. We have a couple upcoming announcements. I wish I could share, but
That's
got to wait till
fantastic.
law enforcement announces first. But some of our early ones were folks that had never been identified as sexual assault predators. And this one guy, we now have confirmed that he raped and murdered 2 people confirmed, and possibly a handful more. He's since died, but he's probably tied to as many as 8 or 9 or even 10 cases. It's incredible. And so he would have remained undetected. And we have some cases that will involve some folks that are alive right now and need to be brought to justice. And so he's single-handedly decided he's going to tackle the sex assault problem until there's enough funding and direction from the federal government, which goes back to our previous episode when I told you Kristin and then some of the other folks we brought on, they're making those overtures to the federal government to say, look, we need help.
Exactly.
If there's money available, how do we use it? If there's not money available, let's get some money. But the only thing that stands between solved and unsolved is this. And the best way to prove that, by the way, is DNA Solves. Because what we did is we took a bunch of cases into DNA Solves through a combination of sponsorship, philanthropy, and then just like random crowdfunding off the internet. And guess what? Every case in DNA Solves shares one thing in common. They were unsolved before DNA Solves and they were solved after. So the only issue was money. I don't know. It seems to me like it's a very clear message. There was a certain number of cases that were solved in Mississippi, and then Kristin and Carla and a few others got together, and now there's a much smaller number. And the only thing that happened is money was applied, time and attention. So at bare minimum, we can say this. It takes more than money. Obviously, it takes hard work of individuals and everything else. At bare minimum, we could say there certainly wasn't a legal or scientific or technical challenge, because where the money goes, the solves come.
Can you imagine if you were able to clear out every case in Mississippi? You could then turn to the rest of the country and say, if we can do it in Mississippi, which probably had a smaller number, let's say, than, I'm not picking on anybody, but let's say New York. I'm just picking 2 places with population.
I think Texas is like
the
top 5 grand champions of unidentified.
Persons. All right. Let's pick on Texas then. And they're joining states. If we could make this work to that level, to getting close to zero, in other words, everybody identified in Mississippi, then we can do it in Texas and we can do it in every state of the country.
Yeah. From where I'm looking at it, it just seems obvious. Like for me, it's just like, how many energy drinks away am I from clearing up the state? That's all it is at this point.
I see a sponsorship here somewhere
I think it's
from
going to
Red Bull.
get done. We just need to find the right partners and support. And
you're listening to Mind Over Murder. We'll be right back after this word from our sponsors. We're back here at Mind Over Murder.
It's a movement. It's truly, DNA Solves has become like literally a grassroots movement. Every time a case is announced, some number of folks become aware, become interested. They may join the Facebook group. They might join our email. We have an email list now for people that don't want to refresh DNA Solves every day like I do. You can sign up by email. You can get into your email box once a week a list of any case that was announced as solved, new cases with funding. And I'm telling you, it's like a snowball. And it's we've built a lot of momentum, and it's exciting. So every case that we are able to help participate in doesn't just bring a value to the family and the local community, but it becomes like yet another way to recruit even more folks to the cause. And I don't want to steal thunder from this presentation at CrimeCon, but we're going to announce a really big initiative to do something on a big scale, not just a case here or a case there, not just 10 cases or 100 cases. We've got this really cool mission that we're going to roll out. And a whole campaign. You stole my thunder, Bill, though.
Oh, no, this is a tease.
Our plan, our plan was to use
announcement.
Mississippi. Our plan was to use Mississippi to launch.
Oh, sorry.
So yeah, we have a plan to basically nationalize this. We're really freaking excited about it.
Very cool.
And we're very grateful because, as I've explained to everyone that's either donated through crowdfunding, sponsorship, or philanthropy, what we've told them is, look, you're not just solving the case for this family, but you're building essentially the energy necessary to push us over that barrier. Like in chemistry, they talk about like activation energy to make something happen. Like you're all contributing to enough force to basically push this into a momentum that will then span the US. And I don't know, 10 years from now, like we probably won't be talking about this problem on this scale. It's going to be a different universe.
So for those of us that want to try to help, but we may not have the wherewithal to crowdfund or single-handedly underwrite a case, give us the things that we can do to help you close some cases.
So it's really easy. There's 3 ways that you can help. So you go to DNAsolves.com, and then there's 3 ways you can help. If you find a story that is captivating to you, whether because of the geography or the kind of case or whatever, share the case. We've had cases where you share the information, tips come in, and they've been valuable in helping us narrow possibilities. The good old-fashioned neighborhood watch, but this is like the tech version, right? Is if you know something, you've seen something on this case, get the word out. And sometimes people don't know these people are missing or whatever. Sharing details of a case can generate leads. And at minimum, it allows people to be aware that there is a mission in the works and technology that can bring values. That's a really great way to help. It doesn't cost anything to share the news. If you feel comfortable, we have a database, like a registry. We steer it more towards those that are missing people in their family, but we collect essentially DNA swabs from folks that want to participate in either helping solve a crime or they're missing someone. And so they're hoping at some point they may or may not get matched to an unidentified person that we come across. And our database is, it's not a consumer database. It's very different. Like you can't do any genealogy with it, but it's available to all law enforcement. So if law enforcement has an investigation, they're able to use our database.
That's free to the consumer.
Yeah. If you want to upload your data, you can upload it. It's a personal choice. Some people are super excited about doing it. Some are not. Some want to do it because they feel like it's like a civic duty to go help protect their society. Some want to do it because they're missing someone in their family. Some of the cases we resolved, they were resolved because someone knew they were missing someone. So they uploaded everywhere. And then sure enough, that ended up being the way the case got worked. If there was no genealogy, they were a close relative. They uploaded as soon as a profile was built. Bam, there's a match.
I had a match.
And
right.
So, yeah, it's amazing. Like it happens more often than you think. And there's a finite number of people missing in this country. There's a finite number of people doing most of the terrible things in this country. Like this is not an impossible problem to solve. So that's the second way you can help. And the third way is we have individual cases that you can contribute as little as $1 to. Some people subscribe and send us $10 a month, like a Patreon-like subscription. And so whatever you feel inclined to do. And
are you set up now for that? In other words, with other charitable organizations that I support, I'll sign on for a year at, I'm not made of money, 10 or $20 a month, and they hit my credit card every month, and it just becomes any other subscription. We can do that now with DNA Solves.
You'd go to DNAsolves.com/subscribe. If you go to DNAsolves.com/subscribe, you can elect to subscribe at any amount. And what will happen is you'll be charged for that amount each month, and then you'll get an email report of essentially how that money was partitioned. So what we do is, if you let's say you put in $10 a month,
right,
and we got 5 cases that are open, you'll basically see the 5 cases, and it'll say $2 here,
and I played a part in that, my contribution.
You'll see that you helped fund each month some different number of cases, because some cases will fund before the next time that you contribute. Some new cases will arise. So basically, we take whatever you want to offer monthly and partition it equally against the open cases. So there's a subscription model. That's DNAsolves.com/subscribe. And then the alternative is just to go to DNAsolves.com and you can browse. Maybe you find a case you really like. You don't want to subscribe, but you're like, look, I'll throw $10 at this case because I'm from Philly and this person was found unidentified in Philly and I want to help. And that's also something that happens.
Or if I'm Bill Thomas and I put in $10 a month, and if I'm Bill Gates, I'll put in 10 million a month, let's just say.
Yeah, if you have Bill Gates's number, let me know.
All right.
Give him a call.
We need his credit card info.
Yes. And we're always glad to get folks. So I think whether you're sharing the news of what we've done on a particular case, sharing the news about the mission, I think such a small number of people, we're all immersed in true crime, and we know about this as we take for granted that everyone knows. I think most people have no clue that these cases don't have to sit unsolved. I think most people don't know that there's this many unsolved cases. So I think that spreading the word is underappreciated. It's a very valuable. Sharing your DNA profile if you so choose, and then contributing anywhere from $1 to whatever you want to contribute. All those are wonderful ways to help.
And if we want Othram t-shirts, hoodie, hats, you're rocking the hat right at the moment. If we want the cool Oregon Trail themed t-shirt, you have died of forensic malpractice, where do we get all that from?
We have a store. It's actually store.othram.com, or I think you can also go to teamothram.com. They go to the same place. But we have a store and we've got a little bit of swag. Most of it's Othram gear, but sometimes we just can't resist. And we wanted to get the word out on forensic malpractice. I think it's an epidemic. I think it's a terrible thing. And sometimes it's easier to communicate bad news in a kind of semi-humorous way. Mm-hmm. So we found a way that is both humorous but educational to let people know that there are lots of easy ways. It's like the Oregon Trail video game. If you're in your 40s and maybe early 50s, you'll remember playing Oregon Trail on the Apple IIe. And there were just so many colorful ways to not make it to Oregon. Likewise, there are so many wonderful ways that we've discovered that others have not made it to the end of their case. Unlike the video game that you can restart when you reboot the computer, these cases are screwed. When you run out of evidence, the case is cold. Yeah. And that's really the only way you truly ruin a case. You've consumed the evidence. You tried a bunch of methods willy-nilly. Some person on the internet said they could do whatever you want them to do. Someone else doesn't even know what they're talking about and just says yes to everything. So it's a serious problem, but we wanted to frame it in a campaign that was a little bit humorous. And so, yeah, we have that as well. We have our forensic malpractice shirt. I hope that term catches on. I think it's an important term. People are very cautious about medical testing.
Yes.
And the thing is, a lot of medical testing is reversible. If you get a test and the result is wrong, you can test again. You go to a different doctor and get a second opinion. I don't advocate making mistakes, but you get second chances. You don't get second chances in a sex assault where there's very little evidence and you've consumed it and you're like, oops, we used the wrong method. So I think something that we do behind the scenes is we're really advocating for standards, reference materials, metrics, regulations to make sure that these laboratories are doing what they claim they can do, that they even know they can do what they claim they can do. That when someone launches a new product tomorrow and it's got a cool website and a brochure, that it actually does what it's advertised to do. And that investigators and forensic lab personnel understand the true limitations and features of various approaches, because this is one of those areas where you don't want to let marketing get ahead of what's actually possible. It's just most of the decisions you make in forensics are irreversible. And so you don't want to be the person that has to tell someone, sorry, we messed up. And I talked last time in the previous episode about Gary Simpson and how he waited a whole year before he came back to that, because I don't want to take the risk. I don't want to be that guy that says, hey, I can do anything, and then it doesn't work. So we're very conservative at Othram, and we certainly advocate that everyone else be super cautious before just jumping into something.
We've seen this in the Colonial Parkway murders, where evidence, in good faith, I think, over the years, our case stretches back 35 years, has been tested and retested, but we have several elements, not all of them. There was evidence at one time that no longer exists because the type of testing that was done consumed the evidence, and now we don't have a shot with that particular piece of evidence. We hope to find something else elsewhere.
It is heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking. And unless you've lived it the way you have as a family member, or unless you've lived it as an investigator and watched your case completely unravel, it is super hard to appreciate like how truly devastating it is. And I got to tell you, I have not found any examples in our time at Othram of an investigator that just doesn't care and just sent something willy-nilly. But what I have found are examples of other folks making claims or promising or whatever. And investigators go to school to learn how to investigate crimes. Police officers have a certain line of training. They're not trained DNA science, and they're not going to be world experts at discerning what one person claims versus another. It's a terrifying problem. I don't know that I have all the answers for how to curb it. I know that when I was involved years ago in standardizing DNA testing, like what really helped was getting the government on board with like standards and metrics and reference materials. I think in the meantime, all we can say is just be careful, make sure who's doing the work. If they're not doing it and they're subbing it elsewhere, make sure you know who they are. Make sure that if you're sending a case somewhere, that they haven't just been able to do work, but that they've been able to do work with this specific kind of evidence. Can you solve a case? Sure. But can you solve a case using this kind of evidence with these properties? Have you done it? Can you show me an example? So just the typical diligence that you would expect, so that people take a more kind of measured approach to this, because it is crushing. It is crushing. We've had some unidentified remains where there just wasn't a lot of evidence left, or sometimes the body's not there anymore. They don't know where the body is, or something's happened.
Or they only have a part of the body, a bone.
That's right. Like the Walker County Jane Doe case, Sherry Jarvis is a good example. There just wasn't a lot of material left. We had to scour the earth for some autopsy material. And you can just imagine, had we consumed that before we had done the proper validation, how terrible that would be. And she had family members waiting as they came to the press conference. They're totally shocked. They thought she had run away from home. And they were just shocked to hear that something terrible had happened to her almost immediately after she ran off. So I don't know. It's even hard to just talk about. But I figured we can give this like dirty thing a name. And so we decided to call it forensic malpractice. And then we stuck it on a shirt. And I gave a tour to some investigators yesterday at our facility. And people have low expectations when they meet me because I don't wear suits or ties. I'm a t-shirt and jeans kind of guy.
He's a t-shirt
I wore
guy.
that t-shirt. I wore the forensic malpractice t-shirt. I think the visitors oscillated between surprise and smirk, but it worked. It was fun.
I thought you were going to say shock and horror.
A little bit of shock.
But you said by the end,
they got used to it. They thought it was funny.
By the end of the tour, they were perhaps coming around.
The only thing that was funnier than me wearing the shirt is that I did this tour with Kristin, and Kristin came wearing a power suit and high heels, and I was wearing an Othram hat and a "You Have Died of Forensic Malpractice" shirt, and some ripped jeans and some dirty sneakers.
And so you look like the guy that might work for Kristin.
Yeah, when my kids were in school, we would go to parent-teacher events, and they're like, "Is that your gardener?" So, yeah, I've gotten that before.
Mr. Casual.
But it's fun because I like being around Kristin, and so I will, if I don't pay attention, I'll gravitate towards being physically next to her, which just exaggerates the difference in our aesthetic. I feel like it's good. It bring everything to the table, and some people like the more casual, at least one person sometimes, and then the rest will gravitate to Kristin. But either way, they got a good tour of the facility. We actually showed them the new facility. It's already built. We just haven't moved in. We're going to move in next month. And so they got to see it. But yeah, it was fun. Kristin, by the way, in case you're wondering, in spite of her formal dress, she has an Othram hat, and she likes to rock the Othram hoodies on the non-power suit days.
Yeah, she has done some wonderful looking photos on Facebook showing off the Othram swag.
Yeah. It's not just to model it. She wears it in the office. So we're all researchers, scientists, and cheerleaders for our own cause. And it's fun. It's fun to work with such a close group of people under one roof. I think, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but like we do everything. We literally never take the casework home. I think I told you that when we were talking about Kristin and I and how we spend time with kids. And so part of that is you got to be really on fire and intense when you're in that room. And so just being around people that are so excited, wearing the swag and fired up about helping investigators get a case, it's fun. And then being able to call the investigators and tell them, hey, I got some news for you. It doesn't matter how you temper it. These people haven't heard news in years. There was no way to call John Shannon and tell him about Little Miss Nobody in a way that wasn't going to make him just go nuts. And I've been waiting for decades.
Where's John based
really
out of?
exciting.
Where is he from?
What's that?
Where does he live?
He's in Prescott, Arizona.
He should come to CrimeCon.
He should. I'll call him. I'll call him and see if he wants to come up. He's a wonderful guy. I mean, all the people there were wonderful. We met the sheriff over there. They were so welcoming. It was wild. We went to the press conference. They asked us to stay another day and review cases with them. So we actually had
a really good sign, actually, that they want to.
We're going back. We're going to be there at the end of. We'll be there at the end of March for another meeting with them. And one thing that's emerged is that they're very interested in scaling the kind of educational opportunities that we came there in an impromptu training session, everything from what is the ingredients to a successful crowdfund to how do you know your case is suitable? Mm-hmm. What do you need to know so you know what you need to know and you don't just send something off to testing? You know, I love solving a case as much as the next person, but I think that the education could almost be more important because it goes back to that original problem. Like the malpractice comes from lack of knowledge and not from bad intent. And so to the extent that you can educate people on what to ask and what to do and what steps to take, I think that is so powerful. We have this new training facility that's in our in our lab. Like there's a training facility component to it. I think it seats like 64 people. And we're hoping to do webinars, have in-person, virtual, mixed kind of events of virtual and in-person, like mini seminars that we do. Yeah, and I think that's the least we could do to do our part to help educate on all these different topics, because it's a fire hose. Even on a podcast episode, how do you capture all that knowledge? And so being able to share that with people in an in-person facility for law enforcement, we have law enforcement come to us all the time. They travel from everywhere because we're the only folks that have like actual facility that you can walk through. Mm-hmm. And now to have this training center next to it, where you can actually go through slides and walk through cases and do like a live case review. Oh, they love it. So we did that in Arizona. We'll do that in some other places. We get flown in sometimes to sit and do like a case review. I would love to see that happen on a bigger scale.
David, as always, we love having you as a guest, and we are so looking forward to seeing you at CrimeCon in just a couple of weeks. It literally only is just a couple of weeks. I'm starting to get very excited about it. And so thank you as always for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And we'll definitely, a good chunk of my team is going to be at CrimeCon. So we'll have a table at CrimeCon. We'll have us at CrimeCon. I'll be doing a duet with Paul Holes at CrimeCon.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do a live broadcast with Mind Over Murder at Con.
We would love it.
It's going to be wonderful, and it'll be great to see you and your expanding team and hearing all about the latest accomplishments with Othram.
That's going to wrap it up for this episode of Mind Over Murder. We'll see you next time.
Mind Over Murder is a production of Absolute Zero and Another Dog Productions.
Our executive producers are Bill Thomas and Kristin Dilley.
Our logo art is by Pamela Arnois.
Our theme music is by Kevin MacLeod.
Mind Over Murder is distributed in partnership with Crawl Space Media.
You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
You can also follow our page on the Colonial Parkway Murders on Facebook.
And finally, you can follow Bill Thomas on Twitter at BillThomas56.
Thank you for listening to Mind Over Murder.